Everybody loves ink displays because of their paper-like, easy on the eyes nature. But using electronic ink isn't the only possible approach to an eye-friendly display. One of the alternatives are reflective LCDs, which basically work the same way as your traditional computer display, but don't directly shine light into your eyes. Instead, they are using a reflective backplate to reflect ambient light. That way it's easier on the eyes, should require less energy, and still has big advantages for color reproduction and refresh rates. And with the Eyemoo NXT EPAPER S1, I have a tablet here that uses this rather elusive screen technology. Because up until now, it was actually pretty hard to get your hands on a proper RLCD device. Before continuing, I wanted to point out that Eyemoo provided this pre-production unit, which will be available to buy through a Kickstarter campaign in the future. So this isn't the final product, but still gives us a good idea what to expect. As usual, the company had no input on the contents of this review and didn't see any of the footage before release. Now that this is out of the way, let's check it out, and I want to be honest. I was super excited to get my hands on this one, because seeing a new screen technology in action is always incredibly interesting. As you can already see from the turned off screen, it reflects ambient light and has this grayish color to it. That's to be expected and was one of the first things I pointed out in my TCL NextPaper 10S review, where this effect was missing. Another thing you'll notice right away is that the front glass isn't matte, which would have been a better choice in my opinion. However, Eyemoo did actually use an anti-reflective screen protector, which is pre-applied. Here at the top, where the camera is located, I peeled it off a little to get a better view of the front glass underneath. You can't really see it on camera, but the screen protector is actually reducing reflections quite a bit. So Eyemoo did minimize reflections with that additional layer. Later in the video, I will put a leftover matte screen protector on there, which I still have from my experiment with the Onyx Boox Note Air 2 Plus, just to see if it makes any noticeable difference. The NXT EPAPER S1 has a 10-inch display with a resolution of 1600 x 1200 pixels, which gives us a pixel density of 200 ppi. The screen can reproduce over 16 million colors, which is much more than even the latest Ink Gallery 3 screens are promising. Besides having a reflective LCD screen, one of the unique selling points, at least in the tablet space, is the front light of the device. Tablets are usually backlit, which many people find uncomfortable over time. With a front light, the NXT EPAPER S1 is using a similar approach as we have seen with regular e-ink e-readers and tablets over the years. That is needed because e-ink, while having good reflectance, isn't on par with regular paper. That's also true for the reflective LCD of this device. It's reflecting ambient light, but not at the same high percentage as paper. And as a result, it always looks dimmer under similar lighting conditions. A front light eliminates this dependency for an external light source while still keeping eye friendliness intact. When first turning on the tablet, you can immediately tell that it's different than a traditional LCD for two reasons. Colors aren't as saturated as with most other modern LCDs, and there's a noticeable air gap between the front glass and the pixels. As mentioned, the NXT EPAPER S1 has a front light. When holding the tablet in landscape orientation, the LEDs are located at the bottom of the screen. You can only see them when tilting the device in an almost 90-degree angle. Again, very similar to many e-ink tablets. That front light illuminates the screen effectively and makes readability very easy. However, it also creates a very subtle haze, which you can notice when slightly tilting the tablet. Another thing you will notice when tilting it is its viewing angle dependency. That was also to be expected from an RLCD and isn't a surprise. In fact, I found viewing angle stability much better than anticipated. I expected noticeable color shifts when tilting the screen, but what's actually changing the most is the perceived brightness. The viewing angle dependency is mostly a result from the screen not being able to disperse the incoming light evenly in all directions. I have the best viewing experience when using it with a viewing angle a little less than 90 degrees. That way it reflects the most light to my eyes. With the original software I received, the tablet wasn't able to turn off the front light completely. I asked Eyemoo about it and they sent me a system update which now enables me to do so. However, that's not a setting you'd regularly use indoors because the reflections of the front glass are actually a bit too strong, and using it like this is not all that useful. Just turning up the front light a little enhances readability by a lot. So that's the way to go when using the tablet. The front light itself does have a very subtle brightness gradient, which is similar to what we see in many ink devices and is pretty much impossible to eliminate in devices with a larger screen like this. Luckily, it's not really noticeable in everyday use, especially if you're looking at color-rich content. Color reproduction, while a bit muted, is still great, especially when compared to ink Kaleido. The reflective LCD is simply much better at it. The same is true for black and white text actually. With the front LED turned on, the contrast levels for reading normal text is great, even with the mentioned viewing angle dependency. One of the biggest advantages of an LCD is obviously the much faster responsiveness compared to an e-ink screen. Granted, the Bookstep Ultra set a new record in that space, but with its quality reduction, it still has a major drawback when using faster refresh modes. That's not an issue with RLCD. Display quality stays the same no matter what content you're looking at. That also means you can easily watch videos and play games without any issues thanks to the 60 Hz refresh rate. Add colors to the mix and the RLCD screen offers a great viewing experience for such applications. Okay, so what about taking it outdoors? One of the biggest advantages of a reflective LCD is that you can actually see what's going on when being outdoors, especially when it's bright. The display itself is reflective, so if there's enough light, you can see any content just fine. That way, it's similar to e-ink. I've used the NXT EPAPER S1 outdoors a couple of times, and especially in direct sunlight, it works great. On a cloudy spring day, or when moving into the shadows, one potential problem are the reflections on the front glass, which can range from not really noticeable to annoying. The issue is a bit more pronounced on camera because it focuses on the reflections, but nonetheless can also be noticeable during normal use. What's important to understand when looking at a display like this outdoors is that lighter colors obviously reflect more light. That means that you can see the contents of the screen more easily than when looking at darker colors. But that's not a problem in by itself and only becomes an issue because of the reflective front glass. Because that front glass also reflects incoming light, which means that you can see your own reflection when going outdoors, and the darker the colors on the screen, the more obvious that reflection becomes. That might actually be something that can be reduced with a matte screen coating or a proper aftermarket matte screen protector. I will come to the matte screen protector in a moment. I want to first quickly also mention the rest of the device to conclude the out-of-the-box experience before moving on with my little screen protector experiment. For the most part, the tablet's frame is made out of aluminum, which feels nice to the touch and of high quality. Only a small portion of the upper part uses plastic, I suspect for assembly and wireless connectivity. The Eyemoo NXT EPAPER S1 is running Android 12 as an 8-core CPU with up to 2 GHz of clock speed and 6 GB of RAM. Geekbench returns a single-core score of 346 and a multi-core score of 1391, which puts it somewhere between a Snapdragon 660 and 710 in terms of performance. In other words, not on par with high-performance smartphones or tablets, but more than enough for all kinds of things. The internal storage has 128 gigs, of which around 98 gigs are user accessible. There are a couple of things that most likely are only present in this pre-production unit. There's a working microSD card slot, which isn't listed in the official specs, so that might not be there in the final unit. Interestingly, there's also a SIM card spot in the microSD tray, which isn't functional and also not part of the official specs. Same goes for the back of the device, where it looks like to have 3 cameras when there's actually only one and the LED flash. So all of that is part of the pre-production experience. The official specs and product images on the Eyemoo website don't list these things. The tablet also has 2 speakers at the bottom of the device, which are sufficiently loud. Since this is a pre-production unit, I don't want to go into too much detail on battery life, since this is often one of the few things that can change drastically in a final product. I just want to mention that initially battery drain in standby was pretty bad. So it would drain the battery in a couple of days even when not using it. With the first software update I got, which also allowed me to turn off the front light completely, that issue was resolved and battery life during standby has been great ever since. During normal usage, it highly depends on what you're doing. Watching YouTube videos, I was able to squeeze out over 5 hours of continuous full HD playback, but as I said, keep in mind that can change in the final unit. Okay, let's finally check out what happens if I put a matte screen protector on there. I have this one left from my Onyx Boox Note Air 2 Plus experiment. It's not perfectly matte, but definitely better than the pre-applied screen protector that's on the NXT EPAPER S1 right now. After cutting it to size, I chose to apply it on top of the pre-applied screen protector because, as I mentioned, that also reduces reflections, and I wanted to get the highest possible reductions in reflections as possible. And it worked. There is definitely a noticeable difference in terms of reflections. This is even apparent indoors. Outdoors, the difference is even more striking. Reducing the reflections on the front glass with a matte screen protector enhances readability outdoors tremendously, and fingerprints and smudges are also greatly reduced, which up to this point were actually my biggest annoyances by far when using the tablet. Not anymore. So I definitely recommend applying a matte screen protector if you intend on getting this tablet. Eyemoo should also have another look at this option, because as far as I'm concerned, it improves usability and readability by a lot. Just to be clear, an e-ink screen has still the upper hand when being outdoors, but an RLCD is definitely better than a normal backlit LCD in direct sunlight. Not only that, but battery life on the NXT EPAPER S1 in such a scenario would also be much better, since you can turn off the front light completely when outdoors. Okay, so what's my conclusion? RLCD isn't a perfect e-ink alternative and definitely has its own shortcomings, like the viewing angle dependency and front glass reflections. Those can be real disadvantages in everyday use. I found the reflections outdoors to be the most annoying part in my testing. However, RLCD still got important advantages over other devices. Its color reproduction and responsiveness are so much better than on e-ink, and its eye-friendly approach and outdoor viewability can definitely help when compared to traditional backlit LCDs. And with the matte screen protector, like the one I've applied, you can actually reduce the mentioned front glass reflections and improve usability by a lot. Watching YouTube videos, playing games, reading comics, and anything that involves color and animations is simply better than on e-ink, just because the colors are more saturated and the screen refresh rate is naturally much higher. For just reading normal books, however, a regular e-ink e-reader is still the way to go, and generally by far the more paper-like experience. So the Eyemoo NXT EPAPER S1 is offering a useful compromise between those screen technologies. It's a device which is aimed at early adopters who have issues with regular screens but still need colors and high refresh rates, something e-ink screens can't offer without drawbacks right now. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to help out the channel. Thanks for your time watching, and see you in the next one.